What's going on, people? Before I begin, before I dive in the video, I want to give a word of caution, a word of pause, because I feel like I have a moral responsibility, an obligation, really a duty to warn anyone that's struggling with mental health issues or battling depression to maybe skip this video, because I'm going to talk about some sensitive and upsetting topics and issues, and I don't want to upset anyone unnecessarily. So it should go without saying that if you're struggling with anything that you can't handle on your own, or you're worried that you might do something, or you just need help, reach out for professional help if you can. And if you're unwilling to, unable, reach out to anyone. And obviously my email is on my YouTube channel and it's also on my website. So I'm available if no one else is. So there's always someone. Know that. So here we go.
It's very funny to come to California, when you've lived elsewhere and it's been an ideal, and suddenly you wake up and you realize you're there. You're on vacation. You've got there. And everybody else envies you. And so we have to learn how to be there, or rather to be here. Of course, it is always possible to construe the thing in another way, and to say, yes, it may be a game, but it's a ghastly game, it's a grim game. It's like a child who's caught a fly alive and is picking the wings off it. The universe is that sort of scheme. It's a trap. It's a thing that gives you hope. There's always dangling possibilities in front of you to keep you going, but then it grinds you up, and then it revives you a little, like a master torturer, keeping a person alive in order to experience pain. That's the inverted mystical experience. And one might ask, well, you could take that view too. And here you come to what Albert Camus said. The fundamentally important philosophical question is whether or not to commit suicide. Now, this is the real question. Is the game worth the candle? If you think no, then you better commit suicide. That's the logical thing to do. If, on the other hand, you're not sure, then you better make up your mind. Because if you're going to go on with the game of life and not be sure as to whether it's really worth going on, you'll make a mess of it. So if you make up your mind that you're going to do something evil, you have to have like a golf swing, follow through. And so in the same way with going on living at all, if you're going to gamble, gamble. And so either suicide or gamble seem to me to be the great alternatives of this life. The gamble, or the gaming, has to rest on the assumption that this game is superb. No other assumption will work. If I may put it in another way, the game is to be trusted. The universe, you yourself, it is fundamentally to be trusted. And this is the act of faith which underlies all gambling. Because if you don't make that assumption as absolutely basic, the game will not work.
We have to learn to be good in a place that we want to be, in a place that's good for us, or in an enviable state, or else we won't be able to be good in the rest of life, anywhere else in life. And that's a view that Buddhist philosopher, spiritual entertainer Alan Watts holds. And it's also a view that I hold as well. Honestly, I've talked to over 1,000 people about this very topic, directly or indirectly, and I've read and listened to even more. And the main view that many people have, the main view that most people have, or the way they go about life in the world, is as if life is a trap or a chore. And in a sense, we are trapped on a planet in a vast and indifferent universe with a bunch of people that have made a mess of things. But that's a very narrow take. Since we don't know why we're here and we have made a mess of things, a person can feel like they may not be that hot on life anymore. Now, barring any mental, physical, emotional, or circumstantial issue that can be alleviated, managed, or resolved, if we are whole and healthy and just not that hot on life, we have options. But we do continue on. Almost all of us do, despite this option available to us, which means we really want to live. We do, and as Alan Watts said, we need to be sure about that. We need to deliberately decide, or we'll never be able to truly live well, and that'll just mean that we'll make a mess of things for ourselves and for other people. We don't know the point of it all, at least not intellectually, and we should look at that mystery as being an essential ingredient for life being worthwhile, to be worth living. Alan Watts believed that we should consider ourselves not a part of the universe, but the very universe itself, since it is essential for us and it is indistinct from us fundamentally. Now, from that perspective, from that view, as the source of it all, as God even, we would need to play a game with ourselves. and that game would be called being an individuated thing with no recollection of how or why we began the game. From that perspective, it's on us to decide if the game is worth it, and it really does seem like it is to me. If you list the characteristics of a worthwhile game for us, for human beings, it would look pretty much like the one we're playing now. Some mixture of randomness and order. And really, that's a very good description of our physical reality. It is worth it if we want a challenge, that is. If we want something interesting and rewarding.
Now this is where one must consider game theory in relation to ethics. What are the characteristics of a workable game? A viable game, as biologists would call it. A game that is worth the candle. First of all, the game must involve an optimal combination of skill and chance, or we might say order and randomness. Where a game is pure chance, it loses interest. Let's just think of tossing coins. The chances are 50-50 always, that it will be either heads or tails. And this becomes very boring. One wants to cheat a little to liven it up, and so introduce a bit of skill. At the other end of the scale, a highly complex game like, I've suggested three-dimensional chess, but just imagine three-dimensional Go, where you would play on 8 boards to give yourself a cube to play in. Or whatever number of boards Go would be more than that, wouldn't it? But you would be in such a complex thing that you'd just lose track of it. Eventually, the game would just become totally confused for most people. So we get optimal games in the middle, like bridge, or poker, or checkers, or chess, where there is this interplay of skill and chance. So we look for this optimal point, where there is a risk, there must be a risk, there must be chance, it mustn't all be predetermined, because any game where the result is known is not worth playing. That's to say, when in chess the players suddenly realize that white is going to mate in 5 moves, they abandon the game and say, let's begin again. And so in life, that's why a lot of people don't like going to fortune tellers. They don't want to know the future. If I know exactly what's going to happen to me, in a very real sense, I've had it. So let's finish it up and begin again, turn in the check. You see, the whole fun of the situation of a game is that you don't know the outcome. And that's why it's worth playing. This is one characteristic of a viable game. A certain combination of skill and chance.
We think we want to know more, that our suffering would somehow be erased or eliminated if we only understood just a little bit better what would happen to or what would become of us. But more certainty only serves to lessen the game. Optimally, you'd want some skill or chance in any worthwhile game. Nobody wants to play a game, nobody finds a game fun or enjoyable where the outcome is predetermined, fixed, or already known. So we're in a bind because we want a good game, but we don't want the risk associated with a good game. And that's likely because we're biological entities, biological organisms, and there's very little advantage to increase risk to a biological organism. Reduced risk was almost always good for the animal until you put it in captivity, that is. And then it suffers, and then it becomes less vigorous, and then they become increasingly more lifeless.
Now there's another, which is of a much more ethical type. And that is, I will call it trusting the game. Because if you don't do this, in other words, if you won't gamble, you won't play. And here is the point of the necessity of the gamble. That corresponds a little bit to the necessity of having chance as well as skill in any game that really works. But the necessity of gambling is very much overlooked, I think, in our contemporary culture. Because this is a culture where we are trying as much as possible to take the risk out of things. And when the risk is taken out of human relationships, they become impossible. We have, I think, in the United States, a very naive faith in law and in law enforcement. We're always saying there ought to be a law against it. as if law could solve things. And we don't realize the extent to which law makes life increasingly more difficult. Because law is simply a process of trying to define what may be done and what may not be done. And as laws multiply, with the avowed object of protecting us from each other, they do not so much succeed in protecting us as they do in making it impossible for us to act. And so the ultimate police state is, of course, the safe state, the security state, where everybody is checked. And you see what this is? Mechanically speaking, it's a system of very elaborate self-consciousness. See, when you get self-conscious and you watch everything you do, because you're anxious about making a mistake, you'll find in that you're all tied up and you can't act.
That's why I think we're unwittingly scrambling to defer more and more things to machines and code. They're more reliable and they reduce risk in most cases. We're creating more rules and more systems to govern life in the world with good intentions usually, but we almost always fail to see the apparent. And in my opinion, in our desire to keep as many of us alive and safe as possible, we often overstep and we diminish life. Operating in fear and with apprehension isn't the way to live, in my opinion. The person that follows the most rules and takes the most precautions and worries the most and is the safest isn't the person that any of us admire or strive to be more like.
So the basis of any community, and thus the basis of any game, is the act of faith that I will gamble. I will bet my life on this scene. And you see, that also is fundamentally not only the attitude of faith, but it's the attitude of love. Love is self-giving. When you love someone, you've really committed yourself to heaven only knows what. Because love is a letting go of direct control. And you might say, going back again to the Christian images of God, that God creates the world by constantly disappearing, giving himself away. The Hindu would agree with this too. That insofar as everyone here is God in disguise, but doesn't know it, this is because you, as God, are constantly giving yourself away to you and feeling lost. Or how did I get mixed up in this world? Well, unbeknownst to myself, I made a gamble on being this person. And so this giving of oneself away is what's called the divine love. So then, in playing the game, if you don't make the assumption that I can let go of myself in the act of faith and in the act of love, you may just as well commit suicide right now, because you can't play it on any other basis than that. Any attempt to do so will merely make the whole thing clutch up and become insupportable, and will in any case be suicide. Life really is not the avoidance of death. Death is the avoidance of death. The constant terror of death, the constant putting it off, the constant vigilance that one will not die, that is death. What we call life is fundamentally willingness to die. Constant jumping of being into not being. So long as you do that, it goes on. So long as you shake the dice and you don't know how they're going to come out and flip, the game goes on, you see? So long as you take a chance.
We'd all love to be more carefree, less anxious, more confident, and more sure of ourselves, but there's really only one intelligent way to do that, to achieve that. And it isn't by putting our world so right that we can relax and feel safe. It's by trusting that whatever confluence of events brought you about, the experience of you about, and sustains you at every moment is something that will continue to do so until it doesn't. You don't live a good life by being more diligent. You have to gamble. You have to take a risk on dying. With love, we can't love cautiously. Love can't be reserved until we're certain that it'll be reciprocated. We have to enter with faith. We have to enter with the belief that it is worth it, even if it ends in pain, even if it ends disastrously. And there's really no way to put rules around it or to make it safe. And really, any attempt to do so, any attempt to take the risk out of it makes loving more difficult. Our efforts hinder the attainment of the very thing we desire, to feel love. So, in life, according to Watts and in my opinion, we have to be willing to die in order to truly and fully live. Not just die, but to lose, to take a chance. It may be counterintuitive, but taking a chance, taking some risk is necessary to properly experience the thing that we're so desperate to preserve and so afraid of losing. The question that I have for you is, can we truly, fully live without being willing to die? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear the uninterrupted version of the video that I pulled the audio from, I'll put a link in the description if you want to listen to that again. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you already haven't done so. Sign up for my email list, my email newsletter on my website, lexbenjamin.com, for exclusive content not found anywhere else. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you on the next one. You have a great day. Bye.